because he's listing attributes of Christ, right? Like in the Bible, these words are used all the time to describe who Jesus is. That he's the chosen one, that he's holy, beloved. And Paul's saying that because we are bound in him, that these are words that should describe us. So over the last 2 weeks, he challenged us to take certain things off. He said, take off sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness. He says, take off anger, wrath, malice, slander, obscene talk from your mouth. And what I love about Paul is that he won't go too far into action and telling us what we need to do before he starts talking about motivation, right? That our action is always an effect. That's not a cause, right? That we don't need to earn God's approval. That we do things because we're God's people. And that's what Paul's saying. He says, put on then. Why? Because you are chosen. Because you are holy. Because you are beloved. Paul tells us that because we're his, right? That there, a couple weeks ago, I used the analogy of me growing out of my high school pants when I first married Sophia, and how tight they were and how they didn't fit me. And the reason is because Sophia is like, man, no, those pants need to come off. We need to put on, not to be different. And he goes on, he says, put on then, as God chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive. And above all of these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Ella, you can leave that up, because we're just going to walk through some of this stuff. The first word up there, compassionate hearts. Good job, Ella. Sophia, you can just leave things up there, because I'm just going to walk through them real quick. Anyways, hi, Ella. Way to join the crew. Anyway, so the first thing that he talks about is compassionate hearts, right? That word compassion is co-passion, right? That you're not just feeling bad for someone, but that you step into their pain. The best definition that I found actually came from the Greek word, the original Greek word, and it means to have pity, a feeling of distress through the ills of others. So when I think of compassion, I think of God, right? Like the Israelites were in slavery in Egypt, and God told Moses that he could hear their cries. And not just that he could hear their cries, but he said that he came down to them. Not that you just hear someone's pain, but that you step into it. And I just think about this, I was looking up this stat. Roughly 31% of the world's population claims to be Christian. That's a lot of people. Now, how different would the world look today if 31% of the world led with compassion? Right? If we took time to step into other people's pain, even if we didn't fully understand the reason. Even if we're like, man, that doesn't make sense to me, but you're hurting, and I can see it. So I want to step into that. The next thing Paul says to put on is kindness. And kindness is an action. It's I feel your pain, right, which is compassion. But kindness is now, what do I do to help? Right? How do I step into that? And I love how Paul puts kindness right after compassion, because before you can step into someone's pain, like you need to feel it first, right? I think about our mission team going to Texas. We just had our first training today, which I'm super excited about. But one of the things that we do in Texas is like we want to plan as much as we can, because we don't want to be like on the side of the road without a place to stay. But at the same time, we ask God, like, hey, use us how you want, right? I don't want to make it easy for us. I don't want to say, hey, we're going to go into Mexico, we're going to feed the children. Well, what if they have food? What if they have other needs? It's saying, okay, let me feel your need, let me see your need, and then let me enter it. Right? That's kindness. And sometimes kindness is just more compassion. I think about a big lesson when I first started dating Sophia, that I had to learn this because how my mind works is, okay, I want to fix it, right? Like I see something that's hurting, that's broken, like I just want to fix it. And for Sophia, for her, me showing kindness wasn't me saying, okay, I'm just going to fix your problem. No, kindness for her was saying, hey, I just want you to sit in this moment. I want you to give me compassion. I just want you to feel what I'm hurting. And that was kindness stepping into Sophia. Guys, that's some dating advice, so you know. So compassion, kindness, and humility. Humility, when I first think of it, it's like, okay, don't brag about yourself, right? But humility doesn't mean to think of yourself as less than. Like Jesus, he had humility. But I don't think that Jesus thought he wasn't great, right? He knew he was God. Like Jesus knew exactly who he was, but humility is the willingness to disadvantage me for you. It's out of Philippians. Philippians 2 says this, Jesus Christ, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being formed in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even on a cross. So Jesus, he humbled himself. How? He disadvantaged himself, that he became man so that he could die for him. That's how he stepped into humility. So when we feel each other's pain, we step in with kindness. But humility is saying, I'm going to put you first. Right? That even though like, hey, I have a busy schedule, I'm going to stop for you. That I won't just say something encouraging to you, hope you feel better, and walk off. No, it's, I'm going to invest in you, even if it disadvantages you. That's what humility is. And then Paul says meekness. And the first thing that comes into my mind with meekness is the word weak, right? Like weak, it's weakness if you're being weak. That's where my mind goes. And here's how I would actually describe meekness. It's the ability to deal with hard situations where the other person comes out feeling good. So like Ethan, let's say, I noticed something about you that I didn't like your hair or something. And I was like, hey man, we just have to talk about this. This is a difficult conversation. I know you love your hair. It's gotta go, man. Right? If I just said, man, your hair's trash, get out of here. Like if we had a difficult conversation and you felt like trash coming out of it, was that me showing weakness? But let's say like you have a personal thing that you're hurting from, that you're dealing with. And I want to step into that and I say, hey man, like I see where you're going. And I do have that hard conversation with you. I do correct some of the things. I do love in truth. But you come out of that just be like, hey man, I really had to deal with that. And like I feel good coming out of this conversation. I feel like I do need to step back. I do need to work on myself. Like that's showing meekness. Like I think of the jobs I've had. Like I've had harsh bosses, I've had weak bosses, and I've had meek bosses. Right? The harsh boss, man, he would, like let's say I made a mistake or was working on something that took too long, he would come in and he just laid me out. And just like, look, I can't believe you missed this deadline or whatever. And I just came out of there feeling like trash. Why do I work here? Why am I here? I had a weak boss who wouldn't tell me anything, who wouldn't address the hard issues, who would just be like, oh, he's fine, like, I'm just going to let him do his thing. And I didn't learn anything from that. I didn't grow at all from that. And I've had meek bosses who's like, hey man, let's talk about this, like what you're doing wrong. And I came out of those conversations feeling motivated, feeling good about myself, feeling like I wanted to put more time into it, to work harder. And then Paul says patience. And I think it's funny that he just ended with patience because in order to do those other things, to be compassionate, kind, humble, meek, like you need patience for that, right? Like to be compassionate, sometimes it's hard understanding or stepping into someone's hurt. Sometimes that takes time. Sometimes you're like, man, I don't get it. I don't understand why we're having this conversation. But it takes patience, right? Sometimes it's not easy to be kind, and it takes patience. Sometimes you don't want to disadvantage yourself. Maybe you're like, man, I don't have time for you. Like, just don't bother me. Paul's saying you need patience for that. Being meek is one of the hardest things. To enter in a conversation and you're just like, man, I just want to get this done. Whatever I'm dealing with, I don't want to be nice. Just be nice takes time. And it takes patience. Actually, when I was writing this message, actually it was yesterday, Sophia, she just got off. She spoke Wednesday and did a fantastic job, by the way. She spoke Wednesday, and she came to me and was like, hey, I really want to give you all the time that you need to work on your message, because I worked on mine, and I know how long it takes now. And I was just like, great, sweet. So she was like, I'm going to watch Quora. I'll stay upstairs. You can go downstairs and just work on your message. I said, okay, cool. So I sat down. It's getting a lot of work done. About an hour went by, and